Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.
We're back again with Dave. Dave, let's talk about reframing failure. And I guess let's talk about why is it important? Because I think today we live in a society it's all about winning and success. But sometimes we just need to see a loss as a lesson. In some cases, so let's go into it a little bit more. So, I guess what's your feelings behind it?
I'll tell you what, like when I was younger, I thought losing was the worst thing ever. You know, you beat yourself up. Oh, why am I not the best? You know, why? I just want to be the best. You know, why am I losing all the time? Losing's the worst thing ever. I look stupid. I look dumb if I lose. But as I've grown, I've realised losing is incredibly important when it comes to life lessons. And if you're someone that's lost many times and you've lost many times in your chosen sector or expertise, I'd rather go for you for advice. I wouldn't like to go to someone who's won a million times. I learn more from the person that's lost a million times.
Yeah, I think the losses is you're learning to overcome. And that overcoming means you're developing some level of resiliency of being able to stick something out and be able to learn from the flaws or the errors of your mistakes of why you didn't get what you wanted. And you're making a conscious choice to not make the same mistakes again, because then it just becomes a choice of not making a change. But let's talk about the satisfaction of winning. Like, what if we win all the time? Like, what does that mean to us?
So I don't know who I heard it from, but I remember someone asking a group of young AFL athletes asking, would you still play AFL if you won every single game? And they said, oh, I don't know, like maybe. And I think the general consensus was that they all said, yes, we still would play it because we love the game and whatnot. So, but the point of the question was, are you driven to win the game, or are you driven to enjoy the game? And I guess something that came from that conversation was, when you win, you are satisfied because you've put in the effort, you've overcome an opposition, you've overcome adversity to come out the other side and say you're the better opponent. However, if you're constantly winning, it kind of feels like it's easy. Where's the challenge anymore? You know, if you play a video game on easy, you know, play FIFA or NBA 2K on easy mode and you're scoring 100 goals, where's the challenge? Yeah, you might enjoy it, but over time it kind of gets boring. So losing is important because it makes the wins even more sweeter.
I think I just had a thought. You know, human civilization is all about conquest. It's all about overcoming and having that next achievement. And I guess when, for example, something like boxers, right? Boxers is a really good example. They go into multiple weight classes. Once they've conquered that weight class, what do? They usually go up or down in their respective to what they've kind of like conquered specifically. Conor McGregor was a good example of that. He conquered his it was a middleweight, I believe. And then I think he may have moved up. He's moved up and down numerous times as well. So I think it's just like an inherent nature that we all have, is to be able to overcome the struggle and the conquest specifically. And that's what gives us the drive to continue to pursue in the face of adversity. But that's very deep stuff. What is failure highlighting for us?
So when we lose, yeah, we might cop a spray from our coach saying, "Oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that." But essentially, what they're trying to say is that, hey, look, in this game or in this match or this event, we didn't focus enough on this. We didn't focus enough on communication. We didn't focus enough on helping our mates out or our teammates out on this thing. So that's the thing we have to improve on for the next game. So with losing and failure, we are constantly being reminded of the things that we need to work on. We're not perfect, but it gives us something to work towards in the dream to succeed. So success requires certain things. We need to work on improving X, Y, Z to get the recipe of success.
Cool. I think, yeah. But there's a catch-22 to that as well. We have to recognize the things that you've actually done well that have helped you get to that point specifically. If we just keep constantly highlighting our failures and flaws, what we do is we're just really just beating down on ourselves. So sometimes I think the analogy is a shit sandwich. Have you heard of that before? So a shit sandwich for everyone out there is you always come in with something that's positive that worked well. Then you follow up with something that didn't work well, the failure, the negative component of it, and then you follow up with something positive, whether that is action affirmative change. What are you going to do next time? All right, we're going to focus on this specifically. So you have good, negative, good, and that can actually be a good way. So you're not always focusing on the negative side of why didn't you achieve? Because most coaches, unfortunately, especially old school coaches, will tend to point out all your flaws, and they'll rarely highlight what you've done well. And then once you've kind of overcome what that potential issue was in the first place, it's like, oh, finally, why couldn't you just do that, 20 other times before? And it's just like, oh, well, it's a bit of a kick in the guts as well, because potentially there could have been some mechanism at play that's potentially holding them back from doing what they want them to do, whether it's, fear-based or something like that.
Yeah, and the whole premise of failure is that if you make a mistake, you're not going to make the same mistake again. If you're a rugby league athlete and you do a knock-on right before the try line, you're going to try your best not to do that again, are you? So the thing with failure is that it highlights your weak areas of improvement so that you won't make that same mistake again, and you improve under pressure over time.
Cool. So we've reframed failure. What do we do? What are some simple things that or we as coaches do for the members here? Can you give us some examples of what you've been able to do with some of the members here?
What we do?
Yeah, or how you've been able to help someone restructure. So all they do is they talk about the losses or they didn't do well at their most recent swimming event. How have you trying to restructure and get them to continue to develop and focus on elements that they did well, so they're not beating themselves down?
The biggest thing I tell our athletes is, number one, I ask them, like, how'd you go? And they say, oh, I didn't go so well. Okay, I ask them, did you give your 100% effort? And they say, oh yeah, I did give my 100% effort. Cool, that's literally all that matters. I can't ask for more than 100% effort. And if it means that your 100% effort had a few mistakes in there, that's okay. Let's use those mistakes as something to improve on for the next event. So if they're like, oh, I didn't play my best game, okay, cool. What wasn't so good about it? Oh, I did this, I did that. Okay, cool. You've recognized it, so you've identified what needs to be worked on. Let's work on those. It's always a work in progress. If you say, oh, I didn't need to work on anything, then it just shows that you might be a bit ignorant to how you can better yourself as an athlete.
I think lack of self-awareness with that one. I'll give you an example. So we work with a lot of swimmers here, I think, as we've spoken about with Matt in the past. And one of the things we tend to do with a lot of their main swimming events, so the real big ones, is we tend to do a bit of a post-performance review. Just have a bit of a sit down and chat with them, just to kind of see how would they rate their preparation out of 10, and how would they rate their performance out of 10 as well, and see if they actually matched up with one another. The girls did, majority of the girls, all the swimmers, their preparation was pretty good. There was minimal interruptions, and they said they raced pretty well when they were at the States, and a lot of them had got some pretty good times with that. So they were very happy with their performance. One of the girls ended up getting qualifying for nationals as well, which she was absolutely ecstatic about. And what we wanted to do there is see if they rated out of 10, an 8 out of 10, right? So they did relatively well. Okay, cool. What did you do well specifically? Training was really good. I managed to keep on top of the food, eating well. Sleep was really good. Just everything just kind of clicked. Everything was just like cogs in a watch kind of deal. Everything was just ticking over and felt really good. All right, cool. That's perfect. That's really what you want at the end of the day. What do you think would get you to a 10 out of 10? And unfortunately, there's going to be things that are going to be in your control, and there's going to be things out of your control as well. I think sometimes it's like when they get sick. That's usually what's a big one that's been popping up lately is they're actually getting sick and out for a couple of days to a week. So then we have to slowly rebuild them up with that. So you're trying to understand where they are and what they actually understand from having that post-performance review. But then you can start to carry those elements of what did really work well and carry that into the next part. Okay, if you got sick and you felt like, you felt really crap as well, what do you think is going to help you prevent you from it's hard to prevent yourself from getting sick at this day and age, unfortunately. But what can we do to mitigate that damage? Okay, cool. Sleep, good nutrition, monitor stress management, monitor training loads as well. If we can do that and we can potentially predict when things are really going to spike and get really hard, say you got exams coming up, intensity is starting to ramp up like crazy and you're pulling up a little bit more sore from training, okay, cool. We're probably going to have to start modifying a few things and a few variables to make sure to reduce the likelihood of you getting sick within that. So it's all about just kind of working with the athlete where they are, kind of getting a bit of a rating and feeling of how they are on average. And usually when the athletes do come in as well, we are seeing how they are feeling out of 10. It's a pretty easy metric, and they get more comfortable understanding how they actually are feeling as well. I know we're getting down a bit of a different rabbit hole, but when it comes to reframing failure, we tend to that helps to focus on the things that are going well. I think that's probably the biggest thing when we ask them, what's actually going well for you? And they continue to highlight that. Because as I mentioned before, coaches tend to highlight the negatives, especially more so the old school coaches than anything else. But then, teens are pretty critical of themselves these days as well. It's always a comparison to one another because that's what sport is. It's a comparison to the next person in the other lane or on the other side of the pitch or one of your teammates. It's a constant comparison. So if we can continue to highlight what they're doing really well, it continues to move them in the right direction. And it's like, what do you think we can control, or what's out of your control at this point in time? And I feel like that's a real critical skill that we can help a lot of young athletes with.
Definitely. I think if coaches can, like you said, a shit sandwich where they provide the athlete with, it might be 10% of their performance was terrible. Cool. But what about the other 90% that was done well? Coaches don't do enough to say, like, hey, you ran the ball really well. Hey, you did the stroke really well. Hey, you served the ball really well. That was perfect. Do that again. But let's work on this and this and this because it will get you better for next time. And then that next time might mean that 95% of your performance is great and there's 5% that still needs work. You're still progressing.
Yeah. And I got another example, actually. I'll go with Jordan. Jordan's one of our tennis players we look after here. His goal is to become a professional player. There's been some elements of his game, like training-wise, he's really good. Sometimes when he's on the court, he has some issues on the court on trying to managing his, his arousal levels, or just how he's, what's another name for arousal? What would you call?
What did I say for arousal?
Yeah, what's just another name for arousal, just for those who don't understand it?
So essentially, if you're aroused, you're highly stressed. So obviously, if you're a boxer, you're not gonna box calm. You're obviously gonna box or fight with a bit of intensity and a bit of aggressiveness. Whereas if you're an archer or a darts player or a shooter, you're going to be a bit more calm. So if we can think of those two spectrums of the arousal, is that we can be a bit more calm or a bit more aggressive and hyped up, if you like.
Yeah. So the problem with Jordan is he would start really well. He's very good at starting. The problem is though, then he gets, that level of complacency does come into effect. And then he starts pulling up a little bit short. His opponent will start to come back. From there, what I've said is, because he's pulling up short, right? And he keeps telling me, it's like, I keep doing this one thing. I was like, all right, cool. Let's do the opposite. Let's completely go the other side. And just smash the ball long. It's usually his, I think it's his backhand. Yeah. So I told him, just hit it long. And if it goes out, great. That's fine. If it goes in, great. That's fine. What I said to him, you need to get yourself out of that as soon as possible. Hit it the ball long, then you can start finding your range. And that was his way of not so much reframing failure, but understanding that he's got this potential mechanism of getting complacent, that he just still needs to remain somewhat aggressive throughout the whole match. And by hitting it long, then he was able to overcome that failure of him, stuffing up and holding back in order to continue to play the match out as well.
Yeah, I think coming back to reframing failure, and the original topic is one thing that came to mind was failing forward. If you think of failing as going backwards, you're really not. In the big picture, you're actually progressing more as an athlete and as an individual by failing. So if you think of failure as failing forwards and getting you closer to an ideal result, I think that will do you really well.
Yeah, and we'll kind of finish this off here. I think we've had a pretty good discussion. Michael Jordan's quote? It's like 10,000 shots?
Something like, I failed 1,000 shots and I've only made like a certain percentage. Essentially, it's like saying like I've taken so many shots in my career, and a portion of them have been game-winning shots, and for some of them I've made them, some of them I've missed them, but the ones I've missed have made me become a better athlete, and that's why I'm great.
And the ones that he's made have become memorable as a result. So, and the other thing, probably the last thing, is no one really cares about your failures at the end of the day. They really just care about your successes, because if you have like 500 failures and you've got 2 massive successes, no one cares about those failures because you've seen the light, or you've seen what the other side is like. It's a lot greener once you've achieved.
If you're constantly pulling up as second best, third best, runner up, no one's gonna remember the times, those times that you came second. But the day that you win and you become the best, everyone's gonna remember that. And those times that you came third and second, they'll see that as you sticking through those adversity points, and you finally came out the other side and became the best.
Yeah, they see the breakthrough. They don't see all the pain behind it. Cool. All right, thanks for that, Dave.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.